Hi everyone, you're watching Good for the Game TV. It's Monday night, 9 o'clock. It's time for Use It or Lose It. Well, on tonight's show, we're going to be talking Super Rugby. We'll have a look at the final. Can the Jaguares beat the Crusaders? I can tell you the bookmakers have made the Crusaders very firm favourites, but there's strong sentiment out there suggesting that the Jaguares must have a chance of victory in this one, and we'll talk to our guests about that and also wrap up on the semi-finals. Later in the show, we will talk about some of the returning players coming back to the South African setup and how they can best be utilised in South Africa and what sort of impact they can have on local rugby. Before we do anything else, if you are new to our videos, go down below the video and hit the subscribe button, hit the button, and you'll be notified of all of our videos. It's a massive week for us. We've got the Durban July. I don't play the horses much anymore, but there's a couple of races a year I do bet on, and that's the Met in the July. We'll be having a video preview of that later in the week. And, of course, my favourite, I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but the Tour de France. Couch Critic, one of our guests there, he'll be joining me on a few of those videos. Can't wait for the tour to get going. And then last but not least, our rugby show where we'll preview the final on Thursday night, the handicap rugby chat that matters. But let's get straight into the action now and introduce the panel. And I'm going to start with Couch Critic. Couch, down there in George at the moment, you look like you're wearing pretty cool clothing there. Is the weather not so bad?
Yeah, it's a little bit in between, Brent. That you can have some cold days and some not too bad, but the mornings, I tell you, it's getting tougher and tougher going to the gym at 5:30 in the morning.
Excellent. Well, look forward to your comments. We've already got a comment from Fat Exorcist, who we know comes from New Zealand and is a Blue supporter. And the question I put on the video was, can the Jaguares win the final? He says, this is going to be a short one. The answer is no. But we'll see about that in just a second. It's welcome to Sean, Judge Rugby on Twitter. Judge, I see you've been tweeting away like crazy. Plenty to talk about in the rugby world.
Yeah, it was an interesting weekend of rugby. Very few games, but some high quality ones, which always makes the talking points good fun. But yeah, it was a good weekend, and looking forward to the chat.
And let's start then by talking about the semi-finals of Super Rugby, and then we'll touch on the final as well. I was up at 1:15 or whatever it is for the kickoff of that game on Saturday. And I saw there were a few guys. I was quite impressed with a number of South Africans tweeting on the game. And first and foremost, I mean, you were incredibly impressed, I think, by the atmosphere there. I mean, you had 31,000 Argentinian fans, but there's just something about the way they support the game. It's kind of more like a football almost than rugby. And it's just a very unique atmosphere for a rugby game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's good to see as well. Very much a partisan crowd. Like, not many guys travel there. It's not very easy to travel there, and you've got to make quite a bit of an effort to get there. So I think, 31,000 people, maybe 30,000 locals. So it was incredible. Ref makes a call. You knew immediately if it was for or against the Jags. Whether it was right or wrong was irrelevant. Like, the crowd were getting pumped. And I think sort of the epitome of everything about Argentina and their passion and how they are as people was when the Jags ran out the tunnel. And all the youngsters and the sort of squad members were there, like jumping in front of the players and stuff before they ran out was pretty epic, especially when Matera got involved.
It was. And Couch, I want to pop to you there because I think I saw a tweet from you saying probably the most intimidating part of the game for them was running through that tunnel because they had absolutely no problem in seeing off the Brumbies. They started the game strong, and when the Brumbies scored just before halftime, I thought perhaps a chance for the Aussies to run it close, but it was really one-way traffic, that semi-final.
No, I think that tunnel run out was more physical than the game, Brent. That looked pretty scary, but it got them in the zone. And after that, the Brumbies had nothing to offer. Those Aussies were soft compared to the reserves and the under-20s or whoever were cheering them on there. Yes, before the break, that was an important score, and I thought, okay, maybe they got something going there. But the turning point there early in the second half, attacking and Lialifano going for that kick, and the kick ended completely the other way, and that was all she wrote. But I mean, if you when I saw that start and I saw the crowd really going berserk, and it was almost like one of those IPL or Indian cricket games where the guys are cheering a single. It's just they're so involved and so in the game that there was just no ways the Brumbies were winning that. But I was surprised at how they just couldn't pitch up there. It was a no show from the Brumbies completely.
And Sean, just to go to that, I agree with Couch. That was quite a big turning point in the game because the Brumbies had scored at the end of the first half and they were sort of pressing there. And you got the feeling if they could score, they could perhaps put a bit of doubt in the Jags' mind, get their way back in. I must tell you, I'd had a bet on the game that there would be 4 more penalties in the game, which early on the Jaguares popped 2 over. And as long as the teams stayed close to each other, I was very confident. But the moment the the Jags got that breakaway try from that. There was no looking back.
Yeah, they. I tell you, there's two things. Like the crowd is bang for blood, and it's normally the opposition. But the Jags knew if they weren't going to win the game, that they probably wouldn't leave the stadium unscathed either. So
Yes.
yeah, it was great to see, and once that happened, and it's unfortunate, and it's just those little things that happen in the game. You know, whether it's a hand in the ruck, as we'll discuss a little bit later, or whatever the case may be, or if it's something small like a charge down, but any turning point that happens in the game, and the Jags pounce on you, and when their tails are up, they are another story. Their backs and the way they run and the way they link with their forwards and backs is incredible. They just need to work a little bit on getting that tight five ready, like the Argentina of old.
Yeah, I think we're going to definitely, when we talk on the final now, we'll definitely touch on the tight five, because if there has been a weakness for the Jags, that's been it. But Judge, let me stay with you there and talk about the other game. The Crusaders really came out firing and absolutely dominated the Hurricanes early. But what was a bit uncharacteristic for the Crusaders, they didn't really put the points on the board you would have expected. And then the Hurricanes sort of hit back before halftime. And I think you've got to give the Hurricanes plenty of credit for the defense. But perhaps this Crusaders side just lacking that sharp edge of old, if I can put it that way. They did, though, at the end of the day, enough to win by 4 points. So, as you alluded to, there was some controversy near the end there.
Yeah, listen, games that are settled by a few points, you can always find a call somewhere that should have gone the other way. Like, it's the nature of the beast. So, but I thought that the Crusaders were exceptional. I thought their tight five really got through quite a lot of graft. I thought Havili had a really, really good game, even though you probably wouldn't be able to tell too much about it. I thought he was pretty good, but I thought Ryan Crotty was the man that sort of kept Laumape quiet, because when Crotty went off, Laumape came back into the game. And Laumape also went a little bit quiet in the quarterfinal against the Sharks, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it was quite interesting. So I think losing Barrett and Crotty for the final is massive for the Crusaders. I believe Crotty's confirmed. I'm not sure about Barrett yet, but I just think it's huge. I think, like, Moanga was incredible as well. The guys were really good. Brynol's having a good season. I tell you, where the Crusaders do work really, really well and where they absolutely dominate is with Tim Drummond. So it's not Tim Drummond, but Mitchell Drummond. Tim Drummond's our hockey captain. But Mitch Drummond is such an underrated player. He's really, really good. He goes through the motions. He does exceptionally well. And Brynol's done well to get the starting berth ahead of Mitchell. And I think he comes off and closes off the game nicely.
Yeah, he certainly does. They did. I mean, at the end of the day, there was that call. And let's go to Couch now to see what his feelings were on it. Couch, I was watching the game in real time. I must tell you that my betting interest was probably gone by that point. I need the Crusaders to win by 11 or more. So, yes, they could have got an intercept try. But the last 6 minutes, the Hurricanes were on attack there. And then there was that moment where there was the Whitelock effectively playing the ball in the ruck and knocking it on. And the ref saw it as a Perenara knock on. Now, I must tell you, watching in real time, I thought the ref had made the right call. I didn't pick it up. But obviously, when you watch the replays, you do pick it up. What did you make of that one? Should the ref have picked that up, or is it just one of those things?
Well, Brent, I don't want to be biased. Otherwise, I had quite a bit riding on the comeback there. There would have been a beauty of a come from behind win for the guys there. But I thought it was actually a knock on the other way. I didn't first see the penalty. I thought it was just the normal kind of like tackling the hand kind of thing. And I thought, but I did see it coming off red. So I thought it was Whitelock knocking it. But on the replay, yes, it's probably a penalty. Go to the corner, but it's as you guys say, I'm not going to be too bitter about that. It's knockout rugby. That's the kind of thing that happens, and it's a few things this way and a few things that way. I'm sure you can find a few things that went the Crusaders way as well. That's just the way rugby goes, and I'm sure the Hurricanes won't be moaning too much about it. They'll probably feel they shouldn't have gone behind by the margin they did, but I actually think they did well. They've done this. I don't know how long. They punch from the ropes. They take the blows. They roll with the punches, and then when they do find their range, then you're in trouble. And I mean, that last passage, well, actually the second half, it was just an absolute classic. I was putting betting interest aside. It didn't matter. It was just a fantastic second half of rugby. I mean, it was physical. There was some good defense. It's not like they just opened the floodgates. there were a few errors from pressure and the situation. You know, it was like one team scores and another team just gets the momentum again and they go and score. But it was punch and counter punch. And I just think, to me, I mean, I've been on social media saying it. To me, that's what Super Rugby is about. You know, it was an absolute advertisement for the game of rugby. It was so hard, so passionate, and just thrilling as well, and some great tries. So I just think it was great rugby. And the only other thing that you mentioned is, and I said it in the build-up, I'm still not exactly confident that this is the same ruthless Crusaders team that they have been, and maybe that showed in those last in the last quarter of the game, where they couldn't really, you know, even in the first half, they couldn't put the Hurricanes away, you know, like a Crusaders team of old. But I'm sure we'll move on to the final just now.
Yeah, we'll talk about the final in a second. I also tweeted, I've long been a fan of New Zealand rugby. I absolutely love it. I mean, remember the days where we used to say South African derbies, they weren't the most pleasant to watch. You think of the Storm of Shocks. Australian derbies, I mean, none of us even bothered watching, and they were so bad. But New Zealand derbies always grip you because the teams go at it for 80 minutes at absolutely full speed. But, Kutch, before I go back to Sean, I just want to get your opinion on the fly-half battle, because I thought it was, I mean, quite often when you get a hot battle like this, one of the players underperforms badly. And for me, that totally wasn't the case here. I mean, I thought Barrett maybe they used some perhaps wrong tactics at the start, kicking it back to the Crusaders. But when the Hurricanes started keeping the ball in hand, Barrett, I thought, was absolutely exceptional, as he always is. But Mo'unga, wow, what a game he had. I mean, what a position for the New Zealand coach to be in, having to pick between those two.
No, exactly, Brent. I think we said before, and I thought the Hurricanes needed to play a nothing to lose kind of game, and the first 30 minutes they were conservative and trying to play, you know, almost a Crusaders style of game, and that just it doesn't suit them. Yes, they good without the ball, but it was they were just kicking too much and kicking aimlessly almost. It just didn't suit them. And then in the second half, when it was all gloves off, as you say, I think both of them performed well, and it takes, you know, a little bit more for Bowden to perform well, as their pack was slightly weaker and slightly more on the back foot. So I actually think both of them really stepped up. But geez, I think we've seen it now in knockout rugby this season in both games. Mo'unga has shown he's stepped up to the biggest stage there is, and he plays the best rugby, and that's the kind of quality that you want to see in a guy. You know, everyone's going to say, you know, Mo'unga has been pushing, but you got to give the guy in the seat the chance, and the guy has proven it. But to me, when you prove it in knockout rugby, that's when you really start shining. And he was, I mean, he's turned two games for me, and he's been the difference between winning and losing for me in both games for the Crusaders.
Well, let's move on to the final now, and just having a look at some of the live chats. Fat Exorcist saying Barrett will always be the first pick. So I put a Twitter poll out there about Barrett Mo'unga. I think most people are in agreement. You've got two excellent flyers, but at the end of the day, the incumbent is probably going to get the nod. Certainly, Barrett has done nothing wrong there.
Brent, just on that thing, I'm pretty. I mean, we all know, but I wouldn't be surprised if I mean, you can look at '95 World Cup and going back wherever. Is that I wouldn't be surprised if Beauden Barrett starts the World Cup, but come quarterfinals and semi-finals, that Richie Mo'unga is going to be the starting fly-off.
It could well happen. And let's move on to the final, though. Sean, and I'll come to you there. It's the Jaguares obviously now having to travel to Christchurch. They have won 3 out of their last 4 visits to New Zealand. So, I mean, they've shown that they could travel. To me, I've looked at this game and analysed it, and I think the Jaguares are not without a chance. But I think at the end of the day, it's the scrums that they're going to have to compete in, because to me, that's the one area where the Crusaders hold a clear edge.
Yeah, I think with disrespecting them too much, like I think the moment might be a bit much for them. Like you very often see sides got to make a final once, maybe twice before they go all the way. You don't very seldom go and push through under all the pressure, playing at home and away and travel and stuff, and actually just go and nail it from outright. You know, normally there's a bit of a build-up. But, you know, if anyone can really just turn it on their head and put the guys to sleep, it'll be the Jags. But I think the pressure from the Crusaders will be way too much. So if the Jags are going to win it, they need to almost have a 15, 21-point lead. Like, they need to really, really move out ahead and force the Crusaders into playing. Set pieces, I think their set pieces are okay. I think their lineouts are very, very decent. Sam Whitelock is an exceptionally great defensive lineout player. So, you know, they've got something else that they need to factor in. I think scrum time they might struggle a little bit, but if they just go route one, and I just think at 9, I think they're doing pretty well at the moment. I just it's going to be a tough one, and I think if they can get some front football for their backs and the guys can get a couple of bounces to go their way and they get their tails up in the first 10 minutes, I think 10-15. I reckon we're in for an absolute cracking game. But the Crusaders will always slow the game down.
Yeah, I must say, if you're watching this game as a neutral and you just want a great game, then I think you want the Jags. I agree with you, Sean. There, I think you want the Jags to start quickly. Couch, do you give the Jags any chance of a victory here, or do you think the Crusaders' the experience and that is going to be too strong? I mean, I will say, just looking at the comments of Stephen Marks, he's saying Crotty obviously a big loss to them if he's not playing this weekend, and he also criticizes a bit the performances of of Kieran Reid. Now, early in the season, I was also, when Reid made his comeback, I was also suggesting that perhaps he's not the first choice 8, but there probably aren't that many options there. But I didn't think Reid had such a bad game on Saturday.
No, I actually think Reid was just starting to he's starting to get into his work a little bit better there. I thought he was sharper. Obviously not yet where he can be, but I mean in Kieran Reid and Sam Whitelock, you've got a world of experience there that you wouldn't trade for anything. I mean that's the difference between the sides there. We saw the passion of the Argentines in the semi-final, but I mean you've got multiple champions in the Crusaders as well as All Blacks. You know, they've been to finals, they've been to knockout rugby. There's nothing is gonna phase these guys. You know, even if they go 10 points behind, they're not gonna get panicky, and that to me is the difference. And that's rightly as you guys say. You know, if the Crusaders get a few points clear in that first 20, it's almost like it could be game over for the Jags. You know, they'll just feel like, okay, this is just one step too far for us, and they might push a few passes, and then it could actually be a bit of a blowout. And I think the Crusaders will just play a tactical game. You know, they're just not going to take too many risks early on. They're going to play. Mwanga's going to do a couple of chips. He's going to do some put it in the corners and that kind of thing. It could be pretty boring from the Crusaders, and that's how they like it. I've just said, yeah, that I think it was two years ago, Brent, that we talked on the betting either on the forum, or obviously it was a forum, we didn't have a show yet, and someone said, I think it was South or someone, that like, yes, you know, these Crusaders should be favourites, or they're good value at 40-1 or something like that. And we're looking at it and you're thinking, this is an international team. It's just going to be a matter of time before they're going to dominate Super Rugby. I mean, they're there on paper, and it's taken them 2 years, and yeah, they are. You know, it doesn't. It's not a surprise. They were always gonna turn things around, and I think the big thing there is they've adapted to travel so much quicker than the South Africans have been able to. You know, going to New Zealand isn't a factor for them anymore. They enjoy it, or it doesn't bother them, and coming here, so they've coped with that. But obviously, this is going to be a completely different challenge, being the final. But as I say, that's a big thing, and then. Another thing is it was an easier semi-final. Let's be honest about it. It wasn't as physical. It wasn't as tough as the semi that the Crusaders had. You know, the Crusaders have gone through a heck of a battle, and they've probably lost two players maybe. So that could be a heck of a difference. And then the last thing is it might be, what is it now? I don't know. They've never lost a game in knockout rugby since '96, but they've also never played the Jaguares in knockout rugby. So they'll scrap that idea.
Well, you know, our good friend Oracle Rugby is very bullish about the Jags. He certainly thinks they can win the game. Sean, I just want to come back over to you to talk about the potential losses. We've already established Crotty is a huge loss if he's out. I mean, Barrett, for me, was it a coincidence that the game changed after halftime when Barrett went off? Because I thought he also had a big game, and perhaps he's one of those Crusaders players, you know. When I say not a big name, he's not as big a name as his two brothers that he was playing against. But there in the engine room, is he perhaps one of the underrated Crusaders players? And are they going to miss him maybe a little bit more than people think?
Yeah, I think like sort of people outside New Zealand were very, very, very surprised when he got his call up and got capped for the All Blacks a couple of years back. So he's really good. Like, he's one of those guys that does his job and does it really, really well, and you hardly notice him. And you know, you look at a game where there's like 6,000 running meters and 45,000 defenders beaten and stuff, and a guy that's doing his job in the dirt doesn't really get noticed. He's a good player. I don't think he's going to be as big a loss as Crotty, personally. I'm quite a big fan of Crotty, and I really think that he's the glue that holds that backline, that entire backline together, and it's quite a young one too. I think the guys will be able to make do in that. And remember, you know, when you don't have Barrett, then you just bring in this old guy on the bench called Luke Romano, who I don't know how he doesn't get an all-back call-up anymore. You know, like he's exceptional, and Romano does his job and does it well. I just want to touch back a little bit on Stephen Marks when he spoke about Kieran Reid. Like, we must understand that Kieran Reid's tightened up so much more. He's not a loose 8 anymore. He's not a Warren Whiteley style 8. He's more of a Dwayne Vermeulen, very tight, does his job, sort of seals up the gaps, plays rucks, plays the pillars and posts, and you know, he fills that job very nicely. So I don't think he's lost form. I just don't think he's as out there anymore as what we're used to seeing him, and therefore think that he's not performing. I think his role has changed. And just to tie into that, I think with Barrett not being there, I think Reid will tighten up even more. So they are definitely going to have to dominate up front, which is the old rugby formula, but they're going to dominate up front and just absolutely work them up front, kick them into the corners, because Richie Mo'unga, he's exceptional, but I think he's a better test playing 10 than Barrett, if I could say that. Like, Barrett's really... like, he's exceptional, and he's got, like, he will pick a gap, find a gap, make you move and stuff like that. You know, he spots a bit of space and he'll kick to it, where Mo'unga's more of a test playing 9. He's got a bit of boots on him. And I think that's where the Crusaders are going to look to dominate, is up front, work them, turn them, hopefully turn a line out or two, and then put them under more pressure and force them to kick out under pressure in the corner, and then have a 22-meter attacking line out to slot, you know. So I'm looking forward to it.
Going to be a good game. Now, you still, I don't know if you're still in contention in your Super Brew pools there, Judge, but what are you going for? What do you think your pick will be then in this one?
Yeah, I gave up Super Brew many years ago because I was horrible, but so I'm going to go, it's so weird, but you can't move away from the Crusaders. Like, for me, the Crusaders I would probably say by 7. I think, you know, I think maybe they might have a 10-point lead, 12-point lead, and the Jags might maybe fight back a little bit at the end and make an exciting finish, or maybe it'd be a little bit tight and the Crusaders will close it off with a drop kick, ironically. I don't know. But I just think it's going to be a little bit tight, and I think home ground. But it's all, for me, the first 20 minutes is going to dictate the entire game. Like, I really think you can make that call after 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, that opening 20 minutes. Let me go to Couch for his prediction, because Couch, you're fading like a really bad golf shot in Super Brew, I've noticed. And yeah, it's one of those things, I must admit, it can be quite an infuriating game to play as well. But we've been involved in a few money pools. It tends to focus your attention quite a bit. If you were still in contention, which you're not, what would you be going?
Nice one there, Brent. No, man, I've told you once. I'll tell you again. If I can't finish first, then I might as well finish last. So I always swing for the fences there towards the end, and not settle for these little purses, you know, that you go and collect in second and third place, you know. But if it depends on where you're sitting. I know I saw you on top in one of the pools, so there you're just gonna have to hit Crusaders by 10. I think 10 yes. You're gonna be pretty safe. I think. You know, it might go to the 2-try difference. I still think that, I mean, it's your old adage that you believe in finals rugby. It's not necessarily as tight as you expect it to be. Some team might blow out a little bit. And again, I think the Crusaders are just such a professional outfit that if they are 12 points clear, they're still not going to let in a try close to the end. They're not even going to allow, you know, a team to get over and then the kickoff. They're just going to shut it out and make sure they win by that 12 points. So I'm actually thinking the Crusaders will probably win by more than 7.
Right, Crusaders by more than 7. Well, I have put my preview up on the Good for the Game website, and of course we do look at things there from a betting angle. I've gone for my early play there, the Jaguares to finish within 15 points. So I do think the Crusaders will win this, but I tend to be about where Sean sits on this one. I think we could have something like the Crusaders by 7 or Crusaders by 8 points. But anyway, we'll talk more about this game on Thursday night when we look at all the different betting markets that are out as well. Looking very, very forward to the game. And I think we should be in for a real classic. I got a feeling the Jags are going to start fast and that they're going to make a real match of this one, particularly with the Crusaders missing a couple of players. Right, guys, let's move on to some local action now. And Sean, there were some Big news coming in over the weekend, aside from the fact that Rassie has called up a lot of the foreign players. Seems like quite a few of them are heading back to our shores, and that can only be good news.
Yeah, we've got quite a few guys coming back. I don't think anyone, JP Peterson's the only one that's been confirmed, but I know that there are quite a few guys that are in the mix. Frans Steyn, Ruan Pienaar, JP, Morné Steyn was going to stay in France, and then he signed for got relegated, but he's re-signed with Stade Francais, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just a year contract, so he'll be up there, but he might come back again for a year, maybe 2. But just the 3 of them for now, I think will be pretty decent. We're talking a lot about the guys that are leaving, but I think some guys coming back is not too bad. I had a chat with someone on Twitter over the weekend. Is quite against JP Peterson being involved in the Currie Cup, saying that it's going to keep more talented players out and everything. When you look at the Sharks back 3, even in Super Rugby, I tell you, they are talented. There's no doubt about it. But, you can't do wrong with having a guy in the squad that has so much experience as JP Peterson, where you can actually look and sort of get a little bit of mental IQ out of them,
But now you look at a guy like JP Peterson. Now, you can't really force a guy to go and live in Bloemfontein, for example. But would there not be, if we actually had to have a look at it and say, well, where would they best be served, the South African game? Would strengthening the likes of the Kings and the Cheetahs, perhaps with those sort of players returning, perhaps be better for South African rugby? Just talking hypothetically now, you can't force a guy to go there. But would that not be better to sort of strengthen our Pro 14 presence a bit?
I'm going to take a lot of heat for this, but until the Kings and the Cheetahs are being looked at as viable Springbok options, which for 2 years they haven't. I don't think they've had one guy. I think Oupa Mahoja was the last guy to be selected. I'd love for them to do better in the Pro 14, but the truth is, I really want the Springboks to do better. So, if we've got books there, or are we going to use them to bring up guys, and then they're going to the Cheetahs guys are going to go to the Sharks as the normal cycle goes? I don't know, but I have no problem with that. I think the Sharks could really do with a good outside back like a JP Peterson or a Frans Steyn. I'd have no problem with either of them being at the Sharks. I think that sort of setup is pretty good. Who else? I think both the Cheetahs and the Kings could absolutely use with any bit of experience that they get there, because they're quite young at the moment, and they could really use some extra guidance along the way. But I don't have any issue with JP Peterson going to the Sharks. And remember, he's come up through the Sharks ranks. He knows the systems, he knows the area, knows the people that work there, he knows everything. That's where everything happened for him at home. So I think it's a great shot from them. And plus, he's going there with he will be involved in the coaching structures, whether it's in club rugby or whether it's with the junior side and the Sharks. I'm not sure, but I know that is what he wants to and is being looked at doing for the Sharks, is getting involved in coaching. So all of a sudden we start discussing succession planning again, which has been our biggest problem in the country, and now we're starting to make it work.
And Couch, I'd have to say it's a positive if you get a guy like JP Peterson who's going into the coaching structures, potentially starting at the junior levels. But the fact that he's had that exposure overseas as well, as a lot of the returning players would have had, can only do our game well in the long run.
Brent, I've often thought why unions don't just employ guys to almost stay on in a mentor role, even if they're not involved on the field at all. I think we've got quite a lot of youngsters who are new to this whole system, Mampimpi and Nkosi, and if you've got guys who they can relate to and can actually give them advice, not just on field, off field, and everything that just goes around it. Agent can only take you that far, and they've got other interests. So it's always good, I think, to have a guy like that around and just be in their ear and try and help them up. And I mean, we can see from the Sharks team, they've got quite a lot of guys that were in the under 20 setup. So I mean, just imagine what JP could include there into their system. But I mean, I was as well, when I saw it, I thought, it's just one of those signings from the Sharks. They've got this knack of doing these absolute shockers. But then when you think about it a little bit, it's as Sean says, you don't want him in Super Rugby next year, keeping out Mapimpio and Corsi. I don't think that's the idea. But in Currie Cup, I mean, I think he's already slowed down. I'll probably have him at outside centre if Marius Lowe still under a cloud. You could slot in outside Jeremy Ward and play outside centre there, and then get a youngster on the wing who's still coming through, and JP can help out there and maybe move out to the wing. Sometime we've still got Mvovo running around there as well. So I just think it's a good thing in terms of that knowledge, as Sean says, just keeping it in the union and keeping it there and trying to help the youngsters up. And I have no problem with the guys coming and then being involved. That's more buy-in. It's not like a little pension fund here at the end. He's made his money overseas. This is giving back, and that's the good part. And then going into a little coaching role, I'd prefer, a forward would be great. Imagine there at the end, BJ Buerta coming and playing 2 seasons and then going into your forward coaching and things like that. That's, I think, where we should be going. But it's a good sign for me that people want to come back and want to give something back. But then in terms of the players, I mean, I was just thinking, imagine if Frans Steyn and Ruan and Johan Goosen were all back and playing for the Free State. I know we're saying that they're not doing well, but surely Kida's team in the Pro 14 playing Ruan, let's say Frans at fly and Johan Goosen at fullback, that's a whole different kettle of fish. All of a sudden, you've got 3 proper internationals there. Okay, Goosen, not a lot of caps at international level, but you know what I'm talking about. He's got experience at that level, so that just brings something different, and that would be great. But shame, you can't force a guy to stay in Bloemfontein. You definitely wouldn't be able to force me. But on a different note, Ruan, obviously he's got his roots there, so he shouldn't have too much of a problem. France, I don't think it's going to be glitz and glamour enough for him to stay in Bloem. And Goosen, he might actually likes the farm, so I think that would be a brilliant setup for them. And imagine just if you can get like a Marcel Coetzee or someone back as well to get there in the forwards, then all of a sudden you've got four great guys who've got loads of experience, and the Cheetahs are a different proposition entirely. So I think that's definitely something to look at. And then it's the same as the JP question. Morné Steyn coming back and playing for the Bulls. I was throwing my head back and thinking, what in the world do you guys want to do with him? But again, imagine what he can just bring to the youngsters there. And also, if you look at their backup option, then it might be a good idea. Anything is better than that. So it might not be a bad idea to have him involved there and just try and bring something. But again, not too long term, and keep a youngster out of a spot.
Well, we'll probably focus more on it when we get towards the Pro 14 kicking off again. But, Judge, I'm interested in your opinion on the Pro 14, because I hear your comments about the fact that the Pro 14 is not a feeder into the box system at the moment. And I guess it's one of those situations, until the sides get strong enough and really start competing in Pro 14, they're probably not going to be box feeders. And because they're not box feeders, they're really going to struggle to attack the top players. I mean, if you had to look at it from a strategy point of view, I mean, do you think it's a good thing that we got teams in the Pro 14, or is it just a case of diluting the talent across the provinces?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the Kings and the Cheetahs can't add value to a Springbok squad because they're playing in the Pro 14. I think it's just Alistair Coetzee and then now Rassie have just done it that way for whatever reason. Like, there's definitely 1 or 2 guys that could absolutely be in the mix. But it's really tough. It's just listening to that and about bringing those guys, and if they all land up at the Cheetahs, that would be incredible. Marcel Coetzee has just signed a contract extension at Ulster, so he won't be. But the other guys, that would be incredible. Seeing them back in South Africa and giving back a little bit, and then they're still playing in a league so it was only Ruan has played in a lot recently. But it would just be good to have the guys back. But my question, I don't know if we can touch on it later, but hypothetically, let's say that Pienaar, Francie, and we can pick one other, Goosen do come back. Where would they best fit in South African rugby? Like, which unions could use them the most? I think would probably be the best question. Let's start thinking about this, like what's better for our rugby as a whole. If having them all at one squad might not necessarily be the greatest thing. But I think having our teams in Pro 14 is great. Like, I don't have an issue with it. and Pumas and the Griquas will be in Europe in not too long a time. Pretty much, the talk is Pro 14. Initially, it wasn't, but it looks like it will be. We'll start struggling a little bit then, I feel, because we are struggling now already. You know, from a numbers point of view. But it also allows allows us to unearth some more talent. But I really don't think it'll be great in the long run. I think. But with these new contracting systems and stuff that have come out, we are going to see a massive change in the landscape and how our rugby works. And you might find that the Kings and the Cheetahs might get more players just purely out of that contracting system. You know, 1-2 players here and there, strengthen them, they get a couple of wins, and then the perception changes. Then all of a sudden the whole team lifts, and then all of a sudden Russie's got another 40 guys to pick from, you know?
Yeah, certainly if the Pro 14 team strength will only do South African rugby good. Couch, any further comment from your side? Anything else you want to raise before we knock off on the show?
No, Brent. I don't think Pro 14 is a bad idea. I just think at the moment they're not competitive at all, and that's why they're not really in the mix. You know, it's very difficult standing out there. I mean, Ox to me is in the running, but unfortunately he's in a tough position where there's a lot of competition. But again, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing having Ox play Northern Hemisphere rugby. I think it got an opportunity to develop him as a prop, and that's why I'm saying if you do have a few players who probably only going to sit bench if they come to one of the other unions, then and I mean they're all from the Free State, obviously not Marshall, but the other three, they wouldn't mind probably playing there. Then just I think it gives opportunity to those guys to develop. I do think the Cheetahs have missed the boat a little bit by going for Harvey's. I mean, I've got nothing against him, and he was the Marty's coach, but I think they needed a really strong, reputable coach there to really try and lure guys and say, listen, we're serious. Someone outside the Cheetah structure, you know, get Proudfoot in there who's in the Bok mix, and then almost you also got this idea of we are going to be involved in the Springboks if we shoot the lights out here. And I think now they've almost just distanced themselves a little bit further. So I think they could be involved and then obviously the money now in the Eastern Cape as well. Hopefully that can change things around for them as well, and depending on who the coach is there, and get a few players. And as Sean says, you know, you get 2 or 3 senior guys and 2 or 3 good guys and all of good youngsters, and all of a sudden you string a few results together, and it's a different ball game for you. You know, you competing and knocking on the door for a knockout spot, and then we can talk about some box places.
We're talking about the momentum when a side starts getting results as well. And Sean, I'll just share a conversation I had with the headmaster of my children's high school a while ago. And he was telling me it's amazing, you know, the guys come into grade 8 and you've got to choose between rugby and hockey. And quite often, you know, in the old days, it was generally rugby and a few of the guys would play hockey. But these days, hockey competes very heavily and the amount of rugby teams gone down. But what he said was so amazing is if the rugby team starts winning and the hockey team's maybe not doing that well, by the end of the season, you have more rugby players than when you started the season, because guys, they talk about it in the classrooms and the guys get excited. Obviously, the same thing applies the other way around. If the hockey team are now winning and the rugby team are getting 50 mil carrots each week, eventually the rugby players or the neutrals who haven't yet decided start drifting towards hockey. And I actually saw it in practice in my kids' rugby season, where at the end of the season, we actually had about 10 to 12 more players in the, let's call it the 2.5 teams or whatever that they had than the start. And it was purely because at some point early in the season, they started clicking and getting the results, you know. And I guess that's exactly the point we're making, where if you could suddenly start, the Cheetahs, for example, suddenly started getting results in Pro 14 and suddenly started competing in, you know, I know they made the playoffs in the first year, but really started competing with the Leinsters and that of the world, that in itself will attract new players.
Agree totally. Like, you'll want to be part of a great setup. You'll want to be winning. You'll want to be competitive. The ego side of it, you want to be noticed, you want to be seen, and you want to see where it's going to take you further on in life as well. So, you know, it's massive. I don't think it's a massive issue for us to actually want to be better at the Pro 14. I'm not saying they don't want to. I'm saying we could invest a little bit of time and money and effort into the Kings and the Cheetahs to try and push them through a little bit higher. I think the Cheetahs, having lost so many important players last season, you know, Kasim, Swayze, you know, like Blomekis, you know, those are important guys that they've lost, you know. So it's just trying to get a bit of continuity. to get the guys to sign long-term deals for the Kings has always been a challenge for a number of reasons. One, with their in and out of Super Rugby, then with the money issues, and now being in the Pro 14. And so I'm hoping that they can build up a little bit. But, you know, there's a new coaching and management setup at the moment. So there's going to be a whole new vibe about them next season. So let's wait and see what that brings. But no matter how good it is, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to really get going and make it sustainable. I don't see it as too much of a bad thing, but I think we're kind of back at square one. You know, we had 5 teams in Super Rugby and we were complaining about it. And now we want to have like 6 competitive teams or 5 competitive teams again, and maybe even another 2 more. You know, like we don't have that many players, like exceptionally good players, A, and B, we definitely don't have the money.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. As you said, we were all quite talking about the fact that we had too many Super Rugby sides, and now we almost expect to be competitive at Pro 14. Although, and I think that is part of the problem. I think Pro 14, I'm not saying it can't improve, but I think we're on a bit of a hiding to nothing there, quite frankly, because, you know, the top players are all going to gravitate still to Super Rugby, and maybe in the future it will change. You know, perhaps in the future we'll be focusing more on the Northern Hemisphere than on Super Rugby. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But for now, yeah, I guess it's a tough one.
I think this is definitely a little bit of a sort of tester. You know, we're having a look at what the market's like, and they're having a look at us as a market, and all that sort of stuff. But I think like the Kings next year, there's a lot of change that's happened there, and a lot of positive change. So I'm hoping it stays positive for a long time. But they've got a lot of guys that have been involved in Eastern Province Rugby for a long time. Robbie Kempson, when he was at the academy, did exceptionally well. Tana Manana's back, a whole bunch of other guys. Like, they're starting to bring the core guys back, the guys that were successful for them, and the guys that work with the community and with sort of EP and PE as a whole. So, you know, that could be the next thing. I think, yeah, I really thought the Cheetahs would do a little bit better this year. I think Ox, unfortunately, we don't hear people talking about Ox and Che anymore. And the reason being is because the Cheetahs are not doing so well. And it sucks because he really, like, he might be in the mix, but after this last season, you know, really not talking about him too much. Is he fit enough? Has he lost form, or are we just not seeing him because it's a poor side? I don't know. Like, and that's where that whole Super Rugby Pro 14 going to the Springboks scenario is the difficult one. So, like, I don't know when last it's been 2 seasons that we've had a Cheetahs or a Kings guy selected in the Springbok setup. So it's almost like you go to the Pro 14 and you know you're not going to be selected. It's a tough decision to make, but maybe you've got to just smash it and force your selection.
Yeah, it's almost like you're going there to try and force your way into one of the Super Rugby sides. Yeah. Alternatively, what better place to go in the shop window for an overseas call-up, because you're playing in Europe half the time, right in front of the scouts and the coach's eyes. But guys,
that's the thing, though, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the guys are using the Kings and the Cheetahs as a stepping stone. They're not using it as a career base.
Yes,
and that's the issue. We don't have 4 to 5 year contracts there. The guys are happy to get out early. They're happy to go. They're happy. Like, if they get a call up for Super Rugby, they're goners. If they get a call up to go to Benetton or play Pro 14 and they get a long term contract in Europe, they're gone. And we're not creating that space where you become a community and you become a team. And I think that the Cheetahs are falling into that. The Kings, just because of all the crap that has happened, have yo-yoed sides and players and all sorts of stuff. So, like, I don't want that to happen to the Cheetahs, because then they will become a non-entity and we'll only use them as a stepping stone. And I don't think that's viable for us.
Well, let's hope Be Strong in the live chat is correct when he says he thinks the Kings are going to make great strides and have a great season next time. Gents, I think that brings us to the end of the show. We've covered the topics and touched on a bit of Pro 14 v Super Rugby, which I certainly enjoyed as well. Judge Rugby, thanks very much. I look forward to following your tweets through the week, and no doubt during the final as well, of what should be a cracker.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and looking forward to it. And I'm glad it's at a decent time, a little breakfast and a coffee, yeah?
No, that's it. No, this 1:15 in the morning is not for me. Couch Critic, good to chat to you again. Enjoy your week as well, and we'll definitely be talking Tour de France and also some rugby betting later in the week.
Cheers, Brent. We'll chat in the week. Unfortunately, the rugby is Saturday morning, so I'm going to have to skip the bike ride again.
Yet another bike ride skipped. I know that feeling. I always use it as an excuse not to do the park run as well. Guys, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks to the chaps in the live chat, Fact Exorcist there from New Zealand, Stephen Marks. Good to have you guys on, and always good to have your contributions as well. Remember, we are going to have a Durban July preview later in the week, as well as the Super Rugby final betting preview. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, pop down below the video and do so. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great week.